Hey book lovers, welcome to While I Read. I'm Katie Dodrell and I'm really excited about today's episode because it's the first of my year-end wrap-up videos. So today's wrap-up video is all about the mystery and thriller genre, which is the main genre that I read. I do read books in other genres, but most of the books I read are mysteries and thrillers. So far this year, I've read right around 60 mysteries and thrillers. The year's not over yet. There's going to be a few more before the year gets over, but it's right around 60. Some of those were books that had already been published a few years ago. Some of them were brand new books. Today, I'm going to talk about my 10 best mysteries and thrillers that were published in 2024. So, my favorite new mysteries and thrillers. By the way, if you're new here to this channel, welcome. I put out new content once a week, generally about cozy books, cozy mysteries, and thrillers that I'm reading. I would love for you to hit the subscribe button if you enjoy my videos. And I'd love for you to comment if you've read any of the books that I talk about today, or if you want to recommend me some mysteries and thrillers that I should read. You'll find links for all of the books that I talk about today down in the description box below this video. If you're interested in any of these books, please click those links to buy it. I am an Amazon affiliate, so I get a small percentage of the proceeds from any books that you buy. So I would love it if you'd support my channel in that way if any of these books sound good to you. So we're going to start this top 10 new 2024 mysteries and thrillers with cozy mysteries. And one of those that I loved was Murder in Highbury by Vanessa Kelly, which was published in October of 2024. So this is a continuation of the story of Emma, which is my favorite all-time book. Of course, Emma is written by Jane Austen, who is my all-time favorite author. So I was really excited about Murder in Highbury coming out. And as I was reading it, at first I was kind of, I don't want to say disappointed, but just a little bit wary as I was reading it, because I guess I just love the characters in Emma so much, and I feel like I know those characters so well that it was kind of strange to me to see this new author that I didn't know having them do things that I wasn't sure if that character would really do. But that book, Murder in Highbury, is one that since I read it, I've thought about it more and more, and I've actually sort of gotten a higher opinion of it since I read it. Not that I didn't like it while I was reading it. So it's about Emma and Harriet Martin. You remember Harriet was Emma's good friend from the first book. At the end of the original Emma, spoiler alert for the original Emma, Emma marries Mr. Knightley and Harriet marries Robert Martin. So at the beginning of this book, Emma and Harriet find the body of Mrs. Elton, who is a hated character from the original Emma. They find the body in the church. And so Emma and Harriet immediately start trying to figure out who is the person who murdered Mrs. Elton. And of course, others in the community are trying to figure it out as well. Mr. Knightley himself is a magistrate. There's a local coroner who's trying to figure it out. There's also a sheriff who's trying to figure it out. One of the suspects is Miss Bates, who is a hilarious character from the first book, an old spinster woman who talks all the time and can be very annoying, but doesn't have a mean bone in her body. So the book is all about Emma being a sleuth and trying to figure out who the real murderer of Mrs. Elton is. Of course, the best part of the book is getting to see these characters that we know and love from the original Emma and getting to see how they react in this situation. So this was a really good mystery. It was very solid. I did suspect a little bit who the killer might be, but I got the reasons wrong. So I ended up really enjoying this book, and it has a rightful place on my top 10 new mysteries of 2024 list. The next cozy mystery on my top 10 list is The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh by Claudia Gray, which is another continuation of Jane Austen. So this is in the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney series. It's the third book in that series. This series, the Mr. Darcy in the series is Jonathan Darcy, who is the son of Elizabeth and Fitzwilliam Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. Miss Tilney is Juliet Tilney, who is the daughter of Catherine and Henry Tilney from Northanger Abbey. And so they first meet in the first book in this series at a house party where there ends up being a murder, and they work together. Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney work together to solve this murder. So in this book, Mr. Darcy is contacted by Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who you may remember from the first book is Darcy's insufferable aunt who doesn't think Elizabeth is good enough for him. She's not from a rich enough family. And so Miss de Bourgh, Catherine de Bourgh, is a great character from the original Pride and Prejudice. So she writes to Jonathan and tells him that she believes someone is trying to murder her. And she asked him to come and help figure it out. And she also writes to Juliet Tilney because she knows they've worked together in the past to solve mysteries. So both of them come to stay at Rosings Park. And of course, while they're there, some of our beloved characters from the original Pride and Prejudice are there. Of course, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Mr. Collins, who is her vicar at Rosings Park and who also is just hilarious from the first book. He talks all the time. He's very self-important. And his wife Charlotte is there. Also, Lady Catherine's daughter, I believe her name is Anne, who is kind of a small character in the original Pride and Prejudice that you don't get to know that well. But I always felt kind of sorry for her. And so it was nice to see a little bit more of her in this book and a more sympathetic portrayal of her. So I really enjoyed this book. It had a good plot. It had some nice twist in it. I love seeing the relationship between Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney. They have a very slow burn relationship. I think this series has taken place over the course of over a year at this point, and you know that they're going to fall in love. You're just waiting for it to happen. And it pretty much has happened. They just haven't acted on their feelings yet. So I really enjoyed this book, and it's earned its place in this top 10 list. So next, we're kind of moving out of the cozy mystery territory into more of a mystery. That is We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. I wouldn't really describe this book as a thriller, but it's not cozy either, so I'm just calling it a mystery. So We Solve Murders is the first book in a new series that Richard Osman is putting out. You may recognize that name from his Thursday Murders Club series. So this book, We Solve Murders, is about a retired police detective named Steve Wheeler. He has lost his wife maybe a year or so ago as the book is starting, and he lives in a small village in England. He's got this nice routine in his life. He has his friends at the pub. He goes to the pub and visits with them. They do a pub quiz that he likes to take part in. He has a cat. He has a favorite bench that he likes to sit on. So he's pretty much in a rut. And then it's also about his daughter-in-law, Amy, who is in what it refers to in the book as the close protection business. Basically, she serves as a bodyguard for some high-profile clients. So as the book starts, she's on an island off the coast of South Carolina protecting this famous actress. But then someone comes trying to murder Amy, and they're not sure if it's related to the actress that she's protecting, or I'm sorry, it's a famous author that she's protecting, not actress. And they're not sure if this guy who's trying to murder her, you know, what is the point of this? Why is he after Amy? Then some other things happen. There's a bag of money discovered. There's some other threats to Amy's life. And so she realizes that she's got to go on the run, and she has to figure out why somebody is trying to kill her. And she ends up enlisting Steve to help her, which he doesn't really want to do. He loves Amy, and he wants her to be safe, but he doesn't want to leave his nice, safe routine in England. But he does end up coming and helping her. And so the book is all about Amy and Steve and all of these unlikely allies that they have, like Steve's friends from his pub in England, the author that Amy is trying to protect, some others that they meet along the way who may be allies or who may actually be part of the group that's trying to hurt them. It's really exciting. They travel all over the place. Steve has to travel from England to America. I can't remember what state they're in at that point. And then they go to so many different places, to islands. I can't remember all of the places they go, but it's really fun watching where are they going next. It's a really exciting book, but it's also very comforting. It's about this relationship between Steve and Amy, how they got to be so close, when he's the father-in-law and she's the daughter-in-law, and also about their relationships with other people in their lives, about how Steve is dealing with the grief from losing his wife. So I really enjoyed We Solve Murders. So now we're moving into definite thriller territory with The Last Time She Saw Him by Kate White. Kate White is one of my favorite thriller authors. The Last Time She Saw Him came out this summer in either May or June, and it was a really good, fast-paced thriller with really interesting characters in it. So it's about a woman named Kiki, and Kiki has recently broken off an engagement with this guy named Jamie, who was a nice guy, but she knew he wasn't the one. And so on the weekend the story starts, she's been invited to a party at this Connecticut country house. And so she goes to the party and she finds out that Jamie is going to be there because they have some mutual friends in the host of the party. So she's nervous about it, but she does end up seeing Jamie at the party. They have a pretty pleasant conversation. And so she's hoping that, now maybe she's gotten some closure and they can both move on. She thinks Jamie seems like he's pretty happy. But then later that night at the party, they hear a gunshot and they eventually find Jamie's dead body in his car. So when the police arrive and start investigating, they're pretty sure that Jamie took his own life. But Kiki just doesn't believe that that could have happened. Jamie just didn't seem like he was feeling that down. He seemed like he was moving on with his life and fairly happy. So she starts trying to figure out what could have happened. She does a lot of things to investigate. She goes back to New York and talks to some people that Jamie knew there. She ends up back in this small Connecticut town, staying in this Airbnb and talking to people that Jamie was around while he was there, in the days leading up to his death. And she ends up finding out some pretty shocking things about what was going on in Jamie's life and what could have caused his death. So I enjoyed reading this book. I enjoyed reading the mystery and watching Kiki try to solve it and try to figure out what actually happened to Jamie. She is a great character. I always love Kate White's female characters because they're always these really smart, competent women. Sometimes they've had something in their past where they've kind of had to overcome something, a lot of times it's some sort of mistake or some sort of failure that they've had that they have overcome. And it's nice to see people doing that. Kate White's heroines always have really interesting jobs. Kiki is a career coach. And I always feel like Kate White does a good job of explaining, what it would be, what you actually have to do that job. She goes into some little details about what a career coach would do. So overall, this was a really good book, a really good, solid thriller that I enjoyed reading this past summer. The next thriller on my list is Like Mother, Like Daughter by Kimberly McCreight. So this was a really exciting, action-packed thriller that explores the complicated relationships between mothers and daughters. So it's told in alternating points of view from two women. Kat is the mother. She's an attorney. She seems to be just very together, very buttoned up. And then she has a daughter named Cleo who is a student at NYU. Cleo is very smart, but she has done some pretty dumb things. There's no other way around it. She has dated this guy who was a drug dealer. She actually helped him sell drugs. She and Kat had a big falling out because Kat basically said she wasn't going to pay for her to go to college unless she quit dating this guy. So Kat and Cleo are basically estranged. But then Cleo has accepted an invitation to eat dinner with Kat one night. And so when Cleo arrives to Kat's house, she finds where, there's signs that Kat has been there, that she's been cooking dinner. There's a chicken in the oven, there's some green beans burning on the stove, but there's no sign of Kat until Cleo finds a bloody shoe under the couch. And she realizes that something bad has happened here. So Cleo's point of view is from the day that Kat disappeared. And it goes from there as Cleo starts trying to figure out what happened to her mom. Kat's point of view starts 8 days prior as we find out exactly what has been going on in Kat's life that led up to her disappearance. So we read some from Kat's point of view where we find out a little more about her, and then also from Cleo's point of view as she finds out more about her mom. She finds out her mom isn't the boring attorney that she thought she was. She's actually the fixer for her firm, and she was dealing with multiple threats leading up to the disappearance, and Cleo can't figure out which one of these threats is what ended up eventually causing her disappearance. So the book is very fast-paced as we find out what happened to Kat. We also find out a little bit more about her history. We find out about Cleo's history. I also loved the message that the book had just about this complicated relationship that all mothers and daughters have. And it was really beautiful reading about Cleo just learning more about her mom and learning to appreciate her mom more. So I loved this book for how fast-paced and fun it was, and I also loved it for the message it had about mothers and daughters. So the next new thriller that I loved this year was A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson. So this book is actually the third book in the Lily Kentner and Henry Kimball series. I read this book first and then went back and read the first two books in the series. I liked all of the books, but this third one, was my favorite. So this book is about a librarian named Martha. And for many years, Martha thought that she would just be single for life. She liked her life. She had a good life. She worked in a library. She was happy being surrounded by books. She was happy coming home and being on her own, having her friends. But then she met a guy named Alan, and he was very charming. He has a job as a salesman where he travels a lot. So they fell in love and got married pretty quickly. And they've had a pretty happy life together. I think as the book starts, they've been married about a year, something like that, maybe a little longer than that. And one day, Martha is washing Alan's clothes after he's come back from one of his trips, his sales trips, and she finds some blood on one of his shirts. And when she asks Alan about it, he says he doesn't know how the blood got there. So then Martha starts doing a little research, and she ends up discovering that every time Alan travels to a city as part of his job, a woman ends up murdered in that city. And so Martha can't figure out exactly what's going on. It's a big city. There are going to be crimes in these cities, and that doesn't necessarily mean that her husband is involved in it, but she can't help being a little suspicious. So she contacts her old friend that she went to graduate school with, Lily Kentner. And Lily is also a librarian. If you've read the previous books in the series, you know that in addition to being a librarian, she is somewhat of a vigilante. But Martha doesn't know that, but she does remember that Lily helped her out in graduate school when Martha had an abusive boyfriend. Lily helped her get out of that relationship. And so she trusts Lily. So Lily ends up telling Martha that she'll help her. And she starts tailing Martha's husband, Alan, just to see what happens when he goes to one of these sales trips. And what she finds out ends up being pretty insane. She finds out some things about Alan. She also finds out some things about Martha's history that are connected to what's happening with Alan. Lily's old friend and sometimes enemy, Henry Kimball, ends up also getting involved with the investigation. So this was just a really fun, fast-paced book. I loved the character of Martha, this quiet librarian who's trying to figure out, could her husband possibly be a murderer? I love the character of Lily because the concept of the vigilante librarian is just so perfect. And I loved how they worked to solve the mystery. So this was a really good book. Another new thriller that I loved this year was One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware is one of my favorite authors. I've read all of her books. My overall favorite all-time Ruth Ware book is 0 Days, which came out last year in 2023. But I also really loved One Perfect Couple. So it's about a couple named Lila and Nico. Lila is a scientist, a researcher, but she's sort of in a rut. Her research that she's been doing has fizzled out. She's pretty sure the university where she's working is not going to renew her contract. Her boyfriend Nico is an actor, and he gets the opportunity to go on a reality show called One Perfect Couple. But the only catch is that it's about couples. And so Lila will have to go with him and be on this show. And she doesn't really want to, but Nico talks her into it, especially since her career isn't going that well anyway. So they go to this island, I believe it's in the Indian Ocean, and they're there competing against other couples. I think there's 4 or 5 other couples who are there. And whoever ends up being chosen as the perfect couple will win a cash prize, and Nico's hoping that it could lead to more acting opportunities for him. So while they're there on the island, they're supposed to compete in challenges. They're supposed to find out, new information about each other and see who the real perfect couple is. But when they arrive to the island, things aren't the way that they were thinking they were going to be. Some things about the reality show seem a little sketchy. And then on their first night on the island, there ends up being a terrible storm. None of them have any phones. They don't have any way. It's just the couples who are on the island. All of the producers have gone back to stay on the boat for the night. And after the storm blows through, the people on the island are not able to communicate with any of the producers. So they're basically stuck on this island with no way to communicate with anybody. There's been this terrible storm. Some people have been injured. And so all of the couples, or some are just individual people on the island, are trying to figure out how they're going to survive. So there's this big fight against nature. Meanwhile, there also ends up being sort of a fight against each other, because there are certain people on the island who are trying to take advantage of this situation. So it's interesting to read about who ends up emerging as the leaders while they're on the island, waiting, hoping for rescue, but not sure when or if any kind of rescue will come. You'd start wondering, some people step up as leaders and they seem like they're good, but then are they really that good? Are they trying to take advantage of that situation? So it's a great book. It has some really thought-provoking concepts. Reminded me a little of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, because people on the island start dying and you're not sure if it's just to do with the situation that they're in, their fight against nature, or if there actually is someone on the island who's killing them. Reminded me somewhat of Lord of the Flies, because we've got these people who are on this island and they're having to sort of form their own society on the island as they wait for rescue. So very good book, very fast-paced, very fun, very thought-provoking. The next new thriller that I loved is The Return to Wyldcliffe Heights by Carol Goodman. So this book is about a young woman named Agnes who is a junior editor at a small independent publisher. She gets the opportunity to transcribe a new novel by Veronica St. Clair. So years ago, Veronica St. Clair wrote this Gothic novel called Wyldcliffe Heights that everyone loved. But when it was published, she was in a terrible accident around that same time, and now she's blind. She has never written another book. And that first book, Wyldcliffe Heights, was published in 1993, which the book writes about as though 1993 was so long ago, which made me feel old as I was reading it. But anyway, I enjoyed it despite that. So Agnes goes to Veronica St. Clair's home in the Hudson Valley to transcribe this novel for. And Agnes grew up loving Wyldcliffe Heights, so she's very excited to get to go and stay with Veronica St. Clair. But of course, when she gets there, she finds that things are not exactly what she was expecting. She lives in this crumbling mansion. She's got a couple of people who, are staff there for her who seem kind of creepy. Agnes doesn't know what to make of Veronica St. Clair herself. She's very enigmatic. And so Agnes is working and transcribing this novel, finding out more about Veronica St. Clair, and she ends up finding some definite mysteries in Veronica's past, even some connections between the two of them. It's not such a coincidence that she grew up loving this book and that she's there transcribing the novel. So the book is just really good. It's got that gothic feel to it as Agnes is staying in this old crumbling house with these sort of dour people working there and this mysterious employer. And I just wanted to keep reading to find out what happened. I really enjoyed the character of Agnes because she's a book lover. It was very mysterious, and it was just a really good time reading this book, especially reading it in the fall around Halloween because that's when the book is set. Next, I'll talk about The Last One at the Wedding by Jason Rekulak. So this book is about a guy named Frank. He's in his 50s. He's very blue collar. He drives a delivery truck, and he has a daughter named Maggie who is in her 20s. Frank and Maggie have been estranged for about 3 years, but Maggie calls him and tells him that she's engaged and she wants Frank to be a part of the wedding and part of her life again. So Frank is thrilled by this, and he's very excited to, be talking with Maggie again. And so he wants to find out all about her new fiance and the family that she's marrying into. But Frank starts wondering when he meets Maggie's fiance for the first time. The guy's name is Aidan Gardner, and it turns out that he is the son of a very famous tech billionaire. So the family is rich. And it seems to Frank as though Aidan is not really that interested in meeting him, not that interested in, getting a good relationship with him. But Frank is still determined that he's going to forge this relationship with his daughter again. So they go to the wedding, which is at this secluded private estate that the Gardners own in New Hampshire. And they're there for the wedding weekend. Everything seems like it's perfect. It's this beautiful place. But Frank starts finding out that the Gardner family is not that loved in the town, the small New Hampshire town where their estate is located. He also, again, finds that Aidan seems fairly evasive. And as he gets to know some other members of Maggie's new in-laws, he starts wondering about them as well. So Frank is trying to figure out what's really going on. Whenever he tries to talk to Maggie about this, she seems very dismissive of what he's saying. The book also has some really funny and heartwarming elements. Frank's sister is there with him, and she has a foster child who she is looking after for a little while. And the foster child ends up coming to the wedding with them, and watching her try to find her way around this estate and around these very rich people is a fun, funny, heartwarming part of this book. So what Frank eventually finds out that's going on with the Gardner family just blew my mind. There were some secrets that I had kind of guessed, but there were others that I did not guess at all. This is a book that will keep you thinking long after it's over. I really enjoyed the character of Frank. I enjoyed the growth that he experienced in this book. It was very fast paced. I liked the isolated location of the estate where they were staying. And it was just a really good book that poses some interesting moral questions. The last new thriller on my top 10 list is Look in the Mirror by Catherine Steadman. So I really like Catherine Steadman. I've read not all of her books, but a lot of them that I've really enjoyed. And Look in the Mirror was just a great, fast paced, fun book. So it's told in alternating points of view from two women. One of them is Nina, who is a professor at a college in England. She has had this quiet life with her father, who is also an academic, and her father has died recently. And Nina finds out that she has inherited a house in the British Virgin Islands from her father. So she goes there to see this house, and she finds that it is this luxurious house, all glass and marble. It's a smart house. It has all kinds of amazing technology. She had no idea that her father owned this house, and she doesn't know how he could have afforded it or why in the world he owned it. What secrets does her father have? So she's staying there and trying to figure out what is going on. How did her father end up with this house? What secrets did he have? Meanwhile, our other point of view is from a woman named Maria. And Maria is a medical student who is paying her way through medical school by serving as a nanny for super rich families. So she gets an assignment to go to this house, and the family that she's going to be looking after is not there yet, but they've left instructions for her to make herself at home. And so she does. They have a sauna, they have a pool. It's a beautiful, luxurious house, and so she's enjoying herself. But there is one rule. There is a locked basement room, and the family has said, do not go in that room. Well, who wouldn't want to go in that room? Maria definitely wants to. So the story is told in the alternating points of view from these two women. You don't know what connection these two women have. You don't know if the timelines are the same or different. Like, is Nina's story happening at the same time as Maria's, or is it before it, or is it after? You just don't know as you're reading, but you find out. There are some pretty shocking reveals, like what is actually going on in that basement. What connection did Nina's father have with this house? How did he end up owning it? So it was a really fun, fast-paced book. I liked both of the points of view, both Nina and Maria. They were both really strong women who I enjoyed reading about. So this was definitely one of my favorite books that I read this year. So there you have it. Of the 60 thrillers that I read, those are the top 10 new mysteries and thrillers published in 2024. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I would love for you to comment if you've read any of these mysteries and thrillers, or let me know any new books that you read this year that you think I would like. If you liked this video and want more book reviews and recommendations, please subscribe to my channel. Now, go Christmas shopping while I read.